In this video, I am showing a scratch and transfer removal on a white minivan from a recent customer of mine. And I want to explain why if you are not offering these services as a pro detailer, you are missing out on a substantial amount of revenue. What's going on, guys? Luke here with Wilson Auto Detailing. Let's go ahead and jump into the white minivan here with the scratch all the way down, basically the back side of the car on the driver's side. This particular customer backed into somebody's mailbox, and you can see that the scratch and the transfer kind of exists only on the body line or the character line. And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, a character line is nothing more than where the body kind of bows up to a point, or it kind of arches up. Now, the reason why scratches and transfer tend to accrue there is obvious, probably, but if you're gonna be rubbing something, especially like in this case, if you're rubbing something kind of lightly, you're going to hit the places that are most stood up on the panel rather than the places that are more flat, in the same way that if you shave down a mountain, you're gonna shave down the tips of the mountain before you actually get to the valley. That is where most scratches and transfer accrues. You can also see that as I kind of rub my hand over the scratches and the transfer, none of it comes off. And that's a good indication, even with my fingernail, that we are dealing with more than just transfer, though it's not necessarily the case. The other thing I want to highlight about a scenario like this is that customers constantly call me asking me to do scratch removal. It's one of the most prominent parts of my detailing business. And the reason for that is because from a customer's perspective, they pretty much freak out when they get scratches like this on their car, because their mind immediately goes to body shop, body shop, body shop, insurance, insurance, insurance. I like to say that detailers can basically cover the gap in the market that I call the cosmetic or the appearance auto industry. The stuff that doesn't require a body shop, doesn't require insurance, and can still be monetized at a really high level. So let's jump in. The very first thing I'm going to do is always clay barring the paint. I'm using an Optimum no rinse solution, and I'm using a synthetic clay mitt. I want to emphasize here that I get really, really aggressive when I'm dealing with scratches and transfer removal when I'm using a clay bar. The reason for that is because oftentimes things like this can actually be removed with a clay bar. I know it sounds crazy, but yes, this type of scratch removal can be done with a clay bar most of the time. I also always start with a clay bar rather than a chemical approach. The reason for that is because the chemicals I use on the paint to do scratch removal and transfer removal are really, really strong. We don't talk about it a lot in the detailing world, but the truth is chemicals, just like heat, can actually cause kind of some damage to paint if you're not careful, and it can cause the paint to swell up as well. And in a potential paint correction scenario like this, I don't want to do that. So I am using a clay bar really, really aggressively at the expense of abrading the paint. If I abrade the paint, I don't care at all. I'm gonna run over it with a polisher after I'm done. What I wanna highlight here is that no matter how hard I clay the paint here, the transfer does not lift off the paint, and at most I removed barely any of it. Okay, so I know I'm gonna have to move to some chemical means. The other thing I wanna point out here is that when you're using a synthetic clay mitt, a good indicator that you're not gonna be able to remove things with the synthetic clay mitt is when the clay mitt actually starts to wipe off onto the paint rather than the transfer coming off of the paint. It means you're really abrading the paint, you're really pushing pretty hard, and nothing's happening. Now, the next thing I move to is a chemical called Rapid Remover. Rapid Remover is traditionally an adhesive remover. You generally remove kind of stuck on adhesive underneath a sticker that's been removed from something like a car window, but it's also amazing at removing transfer. Another product similar that I would use in a situation like this is Citral Citrus Degreaser. I dab a little bit on a microfiber towel, and I start very lightly rubbing over each part of the scratch and potentially transfer. And what I'm seeing as I work in the Rapid Remover here is that almost 100% of this stuff is coming off just with the Rapid Remover. Great news for me. I get to push on the paint, abrade it. I know that I'm very lightly gonna follow up with a polisher, not worried about even potentially putting some micro abrasions in the paint, and I'm gonna let the chemical kind of do its thing. One of the things that can speed something like this up is dabbing a microfiber towel with the Rapid Remover, wiping it on top of the transfer, walking away for 60 seconds to 2 minutes, and if you did that, you give the chemical time to break down that paint on the paint, and ultimately it makes it easier to pull off. I'm not doing that. I'm just going at it and rubbing it pretty aggressively, and because of that, I have to kind of press into the paint a little bit more, but it's just because I'm being impatient in this scenario. Now, finally, after doing that, I'm gonna wipe everything off with my Optimum no rinse rinseless wash. I'm gonna follow up with some surface prep, and I'm gonna be using my Flex cordless forced rotation polisher, a medium cut Lake Country foam pad, and Meguiar's 205. The only thing I'm trying to do here is polish up the paint because I was very aggressive with the clay mitt as well as the chemical, and so I just wanna make sure I'm pulling off all that micro abrasion and the tiny bit of transfer and or scratches that are underneath that transfer that are actually hard to see with your naked eye, but when you're a detailer like me and you're up close to the paint, you can definitely see them. I want to be pulling that stuff off the paint as well, and one thing I've learned in my business experience dealing with a lot of customers is that if you're a detailer in a situation like this and all you do is remove the transfer, even if the scratches underneath are so light you think there's no way a customer is going to see it, the customer naturally is going to take a hyper scrutinized eye to the area they just brought to you because they were already scrutinizing it because it's got all of these scratches on it. So they are gonna be taking a look at it in a really detailed way. You wanna make sure you run a polisher over it. I always use a forced rotation when I'm going over character lines like this when I am doing scratch removal, because I'm gonna get inevitably a lot of stalling if I use a dual action, and it slows my process down. Now let's go ahead and come in for the after look. You can see the before and after. There is absolutely no transfer, no scratches left over whatsoever. I always take a light to the paint like this, not because I'm worried about scratches being left over, but because I wanna make sure I remove any and all polish. And you can see there's a tiny little chip in the paint inside the gas cap or the gas hood there that would require touch-up paint because it went all the way to the metal. And outside of that, all of this was removed 100%, and the paint looks absolutely fantastic. Guys, from a business perspective, doing stuff like this opens you up as a detailer to what I call, like I said, the cosmetic car care industry, which is basically everything between you and the body shop. Most of this stuff is not covered by insurance. If it is, it basically meets the deductible, and people don't want to deal with insurance anyways. The detailer can grab a huge part of the market by starting to offer this, and you can start making upwards $100, $200, $300, $400 an hour just with scratch removal, depending on where you are and the type of people you're working with, and of course, the type of cars, daily drivers or not, that you are working with. As always, all the tools and products I used in this video will be linked up in the YouTube description box, as well as my pro detailing toolbox. It's a free resource showing you guys all the tools and products I suggest for professionals. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and remember, a great detailer is always learning. And from Luke here at Wilson Auto Detailing, I'll see you guys in the next video.